Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of NYC Film Green Office Hours. My name's Shira Gans. I'm the Senior Executive Director of Policy and Programs at the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and I'm also the Director of our NYC Film Green program. So NYC Film Green is our program that promotes sustainable film production in New York City. And we're the city agency that supports all the creative sectors in New York City and permits all on-location production across the 5 boroughs. So I'm excited for tonight's conversation about ways to reduce waste on set and on location. And I want to give a big thanks to everyone at MOME who helps pull these together, and to Earth Angel as well. And before I bring our amazing speakers to turn on their cameras, I want to set the stage a little bit about what we're talking about tonight. So first, I just want to explain that film and television is not only an iconic industry for New York City, it's a huge industry. So if we focus in on NYC film and TV production, that represents 46,700 jobs, which is nearly half of all the jobs in the film and television industry here. It's 4.7 billion in wages, and that's 40% of the entire industry, and 14.9 billion in economic output, which is actually only 23% of all the direct output of the industry. So while it's really big business and it's great and it employs lots of people and it draws people to our city, it's also unfortunately a pretty wasteful industry at times as well. So we estimate that each New York City production produces 250 tons of waste. That's picturing 60 30-yard dumpsters full of waste headed to landfill. But do not despair. Tonight we have a panel of experts who are going to talk about lots of different solutions and strategies for addressing this big problem. So everybody, please turn your cameras on. So it's really exciting to have you guys all here. Thanks for joining me tonight. So I guess I want to just start the conversation a little bit by setting the stage. So, I gave a little bit of insight into what the problem is, but I kind of want to talk to a bunch of you about giving a little more flavor to what's going on. So Jonathan, you're a location manager and scout, and you're kind of dealing with this really hands-on. So could you paint a little bit of a picture for us as to, what your role is, how it intersects with the issue of waste on set, and then what you're seeing?
Hi, so my name is Jonathan Yee. I'm a location manager here based in New York City. So basically, the purpose of my position is to find film sets for TV series and movies. But there's also a logistical part of my business that comes with it. And a little bit is part of waste management. New York City actually does a really good job of it. There's great vendors, great infrastructure to have people around to help. Avid Waste Management is one of my favorites. They do recycling, composting, everything you need to do. I always call them magicians because the garbage bags are always gone by the next morning. So, they're really great. But typically there is a lot of waste. In my world, especially on location, it's mostly food and beverage cans, and then just kind of random stuff. You'll be surprised, maybe something from like plastic wrapping from set pieces or whatnot. But yeah, that's generally what we do. And then, yeah, that's how we see sustainability. That's kind of we do waste management. It works well.
Great. So that kind of, you mentioned food waste. That kind of brings me to Francesca. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the company you work for and what it's designed to address.
Yes, hi, I'm Francesca Oliveri, and I'm the VP of Client Services at Redish. And Redish is a reusable company. Our main mission is to reduce the use of single-use disposables. And as you can imagine, certainly not just in the movie industry, but as we know, there's many single-use plastic clamshells and even compostables that end up in the garbage. So our company came about to act somewhat like a linen service. We provide clean containers and cups to movie sets, to businesses, to schools. We pick the people use them as they would use a single use, and then we bring them back to our facility, clean and sanitize. So we're really addressing the issue of having food on the go or drink on the go without using a single use container.
Thanks. So Steve, you kind of come at it from a little bit of a different angle that doesn't always get addressed. So can you tell us about Scriptation and kind of what the impetus was for you to create that company?
Sure. So I'm Steve Vitolo. I'm CEO and founder of Scriptation. And we're a PDF annotation app for film and TV production, and our goal is to eliminate paper waste on set. So my background is as a writer, but I worked as a script coordinator, writer assistant for a number of years in the writer's office. And I was the one, so as a script coordinator, I was the one, printing out the 50-page script to then give it to the production assistant to make 100+ copies that were inevitably, going to be disregarded by the next day because there was a new script revision. So I thought, what if there was a way to make notes digitally on a script, which we know we could, do with Adobe for a long time, but what if you can make notes and then transfer those notes into new script revisions? I felt like that if we could do that, then we could really solve the script revision problem and the paper problem. So I created an app almost about like 10 years ago. And since, making notes on a script or having a script touches everyone on set and offset, it was pretty well adopted and solved a major problem.
Could you just give a little, when we spoke before, you kind of had some alarming numbers around the number of pieces of paper that might go into being printed out and then just chucked in a trash can.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you asked me that because it made me look at the numbers for this year and what we're tracking so far this year. So this year, coming through Scriptation, over 25 million sheets of paper have been diverted, which equals over 1,000 metric tons of CO2, 2.5 million gallons of water, approximately 3,000 trees, 65 metric tons of solid waste. So that is just what we do. And other people use different softwares and things like that. So, and obviously people are still printing scripts, which we don't want them to do. But yeah, there's a lot of paper waste, and there was a study, this is years ago, that on one single production over a 6-month period, 1.2 million sheets of paper went through that production. So it's not a small problem, and paper touches everything. So it's not just the paper cost, it's the printing cost and the brads and the ink and toner. So all of that stuff. So it adds up to a lot of unnecessary waste that you could already, a lot of people have devices already, and why print when you could look at it on your phone or your iPad or your computer.
Sure. And I think, what's interesting to me about the magnitude of that is that in all these discussions, often scripts don't even come up. And that's just one component. I mean, obviously, the script is a central component to a film and television production. But when you think about all the other things being thrown away, just addressing that one component is having this massive impact. Francesca, did you have any, not to put you on the spot, but you had some numbers when we spoke just about kind of the scale of single-use issues or some of the amounts you've diverted?
Yeah, I mean, well, the fact of the matter is most of, there's something like one, and then these are probably not even as up to date as they should be, but there's something like 1 trillion single-use food service use each year. And that equates to 7 million tons of waste, which equals the weight of 25 Empire State Buildings, just to give you a sense of like the problem we're dealing with here. But we, every time someone uses one of our containers, we have a QR code on the back of it so we can track every container. So every time our container is washed and scanned, we have a way of saying one less single use was used. And therefore we can share that information with our clients, which is, exciting to track the impact of working with us.
For sure. Okay, so we kind of have a picture of the problem. It's large. Let's talk a little bit about some of the solutions that you guys represent. So, Tamsin, it would be really great to hear, you have this title like waste strategy reduction. I'm probably butchering your title a little bit, but I think it has those words. And so it'd be great if you could kind of talk us through a little bit about how you work with clients to come up with a plan to reduce waste, how you execute that plan, and then some of the innovations that you're trying to kind of get ahead of the issues you see on set.
Wow. Yeah. I'm Tamsin Hollo with Earth Angel. We provide end-to-end sustainability services to TV and film, some live events as well. So that can include things like zero waste management, energy audits, material recovery and donation, really the whole shebang from soft prep to wrap and beyond. so yeah, we're in terms of waste strategy, you know, we are looking at that daily daily involvement with cast and crew every day and providing our zero waste solutions. We're looking at getting the data for all of those for all those days on set. And then toward wrap, we're looking at finding homes for the thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of objects that are incorporated in every set, and making sure that they don't go into landfill.
Actually, we did a Film Green office hours on sustainable set design, and this issue came up that, you know, oftentimes once the crew takes what they want, everything else is just getting sent into a landfill, like stoves and furniture and really nice clothing, which was sort of shocking to me. So you had talked a little bit about, you know, how to kind of, those are downstream effects, but we were talking a little bit about upstream. Could you kind of delve into that a bit?
Yeah, increasingly we're asking for inclusion a little bit earlier on in the planning phases. Simple things, you know, you're talking about paper, and we were just talking about this today, that simple requests like, you know, can you buy 100% recycled paper or even 30% recycled paper? Sometimes those get lost if we come on board a little too late. So increasingly we're asking for that earlier involvement. It really comes into play when we're looking at set design and art. How can we make, you know, smart choices regarding more sustainable objects? How can we avoid objects that are damaging, costly to get rid of, hazardous waste, and replace them with equally good options? We're certainly not here to tell any department, you know, what to do or what choices to make, but there are options for building and construction material, even before we get to that phase of then having to get rid of them downstream.
Right. So if you're starting early, then it's not just about finding a home for it after. You could actually reduce the waste stream.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going to turn to Malik. So our office has a partnership with Materials for the Arts to help fund Malik's position, another position that focused just on film and television. So can you tell us a little bit about Materials for the Arts and what your role is and how you help with all this waste?
Yeah, sure. Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm Malik. I'm a field donations coordinator for Materials for the Arts. Essentially, what Materials for the Arts does is they get in contact with other nonprofits, schools, other city agencies, and such, and individuals. And what they do is they contact us, and we try to find a new home for these items. Either redistribute them out to other schools, other city agencies, or individual people who are members of our organization. When it comes to film and television, my role is to basically coordinate those items either being stored in our warehouse and then later redistributed, or conducting a liquidation event. Essentially, if you're aware, there are staff meetings where they come together and they purchase items that were used during the filming. And once those processes are over, I can step in and then invite our members to come to these events and, you know, claim the items that they find desirable.
And so give us a little more color to that. So how does that work? Like are you reaching out to productions? Are they reaching out to you? And then if you have a story of, you know, one production that you did a liquidation event and where some of those items went, though, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. So to answer the second half of the question, there was actually one organization in particular. We were working in the summer in July with Stars, and they had I believe 3 locations where they were storing items, and one particular organization had attended at least 2 of them. They were Astoria Values, and they're basically a nonprofit. They run an after school and tutoring program, and they came to both events, and they were able to find plants, furniture, um, a refrigerator at one of the warehouses, and they were able to set these the items that they were able to find, and basically kind of revamp their program and make it look extremely nice for the children and the parents that were coming by during the summer. And yeah, that's just one example of the many groups that we have helped along the way. Yeah. To answer your first half of the question though, can you just repeat it for me one more time?
Yeah, just so how is it that you come into contact with
Oh,
the different productions? Like, what's the process? How's it go?
yeah.
How do you like it to go?
Yeah, so I've personally reached out. I was a production assistant uh back in 2020. So I've had a number of contacts along the way that I've gathered, and I was reaching out to them early on when I was first hired. But since then, I've noticed that more productions, as we continue to do the liquidation events, are reaching out to us, and I just feel like because we've worked with one production coordinator here or one UPM here, they go to another production and they spread the word. So I think word of mouth has probably been the strongest way to connect us to new productions. But we definitely try our hand at reaching out. But I just think the word of mouth has been the strongest way to connect.
Yeah. So I guess for the folks who are tuning in tonight, we'll share everyone's contact information that's able to. And I think one of the themes that'll come out through our discussion is, one is trying to put a little more structure into these resources and how do we access them, and also to plan a little bit in advance. So I know, Steve, we had a conversation about you created this great software that addresses this big problem, but you had a little bit of a circuitous route to figure out how to get that word out. And so if you could talk a little bit about how you've seen the adoption of scriptation.
Yeah, I mean, I started this as kind of a side hustle, because anyone that's worked on production knows you're just an independent contractor, and through no fault of your own, you're routinely out of a job. So I was working on well, I once told a line producer, I'm like, I either work on the first season of a show or the last season of a show. He goes, no, you only work on the last season of a show. So anyway, I was always on these one and done shows. And I was just out of work for a number of months. So I didn't really have any money to put into marketing or really software development, but I was lucky enough and I found somebody that could program the app, and we sort of went back and forth. And then I got some really good advice, which was if this, tool is as beneficial as you say it would be, then just go direct to consumer, give it to somebody on set, and then it will spread from there. And thankfully, I had no money to really do any marketing, but that was my best marketing. Because if there was somebody using scriptation on set in the very early days when it, was an app that you could download for like $10, and there was a script revision and 15 revised pages or 20 revised pages came to set. Somebody in a binder was going through and collating their script and making notes. And then another person that had scriptation hit a button and then was ready to go in 30 seconds. That's sort of my best marketing that I could do. And then what was so horrible for me, which was getting on all these canceled shows, well, if I got, 10 or 20 scriptation users on that one show and that show got canceled, then two people went over here and three people went over there. So it ended up kind of spreading that way. And then eventually, during the pandemic, when a lot of people were, unfortunately out of work, they had time to kind of learn some new tools, and there was a lot of people at home. And we did a webinar with a few directors that had used scriptation, and we had over 1,000 people on the webinar. So I think it shows that, if you have tools there, like, yes, I came at this from a sustainability perspective. What are we doing with these, 5 to 7,000 pages that I would, print every night that would then be obsolete by the next day? But, when there's a real productivity aspect of it and a time saving aspect of it, then if you marry both of those, then you could have really positive change, and people that don't really think too much about the environment can be like, oh, wow, like I am saving thousands of sheets of paper and take my name off the script distribution list, which is like a big goal for us. Like the more people we can tick off that hard copy distribution list, like those are wins.
Yeah, and so I think that's important because one, it's something that an individual can do on a set. You don't need to have that come top down. That's something you're empowered to do. And I think another important point is that these things they can't just be about making things sustainable, I think. I mean, of course, that's an important goal, but the more the more they make work easier or more enjoyable or streamline something, the more likely they are to get traction. So I don't know, Jonathan, maybe you could give us a little insight into some of the other challenges, you know, that folks face on set that you think contribute to either people adopting sustainability or not. Like we talked about some of the manual labor issues or things like that.
Yeah, so like I think the biggest one is convenience and convenience, money, and education. You know, which is, you know, for example, I know before we would with Earth Angels would have the water jugs instead of doing water bottles and stuff like that. So it's less convenient with the water jugs just because you have to go to a certain place, but it is better for the environment to do that because we're reusing water bottles. And then the other thing is like it's money. For a lot of the smaller productions, they don't have the budget to get a lot of these eco consultants. So, you know, that's like kind of an issue I see with some cheaper producers because they have to. They don't have the money to do that. So those are, I think, the two biggest things that are in the way. And then, yeah, you know, I love working with the consultants because they make my job a lot easier. So, but that's what I would say the two biggest issues are.
And so I guess maybe Tamsin, you could talk a little bit about some of the education you do. I hear this is an issue that comes up a lot, that it's sort of a stressful industry and there's a lot of things you have to know. And you're under a time constraint all the time. So if you add in something else, even if it's, you know, a new software that could help you, it can feel overwhelming. So how do you help with kind of the overwhelm and getting ahead of that?
Yeah, we always have a rep on set, and they're there by the zero waste stations with their hands outstretched, reassuring people that everybody makes mistakes. We don't always have the answers, and trying to alleviate some of that stress that people feel. You know, it's a busy environment. Speed is everything on set. People don't have too long to break for lunch, and then they see this little, you know, perky face saying, "Oh, look, we're doing composting," and they just want to kill somebody. So we try and get around that by reassuring them that nobody knows how to do this first time out. It is difficult when we have a lot of day players, and then there's that continual education and re-education just on the basics. What is the difference between recycling and compostables? Also, things are tricky these days because, of course, we have a lot of elements on set and in food service that look like plastic but are actually compostable. It looks like a regular recyclable cup, but it's actually a compostable cup. So we do, you know, we have like little sandwich boards that will pin up today's you know, plates and glasses too, to say this is compostable today, this is landfill today, and we always have someone on set. And then, yeah, we use a lot of visual aids. Sometimes I'll bring in a bucket of the compost that crew has made, and, you know, bring little flower pots, and, you know, we can plant a little sunflower or something, because anything that kind of you know, reestablishes that connection to what we're doing every day, that it is meaningful. You can see the light bulbs going on over people's heads. But it's difficult to.
Yeah, because you know, some of it is not super complicated, but it's about breaking that down. And I think we've all had that experience at a to-go place, you know, and you're going to throw out your thing and you're like, I don't know, like what's landfill, what's like, I don't know, I'm just gonna throw it in the landfill thing. So Francesca, you know, on the education front, you had talked about the life cycle analysis that you guys had done, which I thought was super interesting. Could you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, so we did a life cycle analysis where we compared compostable products and basically different sizes of the different SKUs that we use with the SKUs that with our SKUs, with Redish SKUs, and basically took into account in because a lot of times people say, hey, you're washing them and you're driving to get them and you're using a machine, isn't that worse, like, or isn't that as bad or whatever? The fact of the matter is most of the energy and water goes into the manufacturing process. So even if you're making something, so if you're making something just for one use, you're expending all this energy and water up front, and then it has like a 10-minute life cycle and it's thrown away. And unfortunately, a lot of the compostable stuff isn't composted because a lot of the packaging composters don't want to take it. So oftentimes that stuff, even though they say it's compostable, it goes in the landfill still, which is actually really upsetting. So yeah, this life cycle analysis was super interesting and useful information we have on our website. People are interested in more of the details. But one thing we find is if we lose one of our containers, which is made out of a polypropylene, so it's like a pretty solid plastic, if we lose this right away, it's worse because there a lot of energy and water goes into making that. But if it's you after the fourth use, we start to see an environmental impact. And we have a QR code on the back where someone can scan that QR code and know how many times that particular container or any of our containers or cups have been used. So they really can track the journey and really understand like what this impact means, like how much water has been saved, how much energy has been saved, how many bags of waste have not been sent to landfill, etc. So it's a way to kind of connect yourself that actually pay attention. It matters where you're putting something, you know, throwing it away, not in the garbage, but like returning it to the reusable bin.
Are you able to see how often clients or people, either, it doesn't have to be just in film and television, engage with that QR
Yeah.
code to track it?
Yeah, we can. And actually, we've developed a whole bunch of like we call them like tabling activations. We don't do this so much with the movies sets because obviously, as you all know, it's super busy and hard. But a lot of our corporate clients in schools, we do tabling events where we have little games associated with those QR codes. So we do like, you know, scan your number to win. And if you find a certain number, you get a special treat or a free coffee or something. But again, it's all these different ways to get people engaged with what we're doing and why that the actual reuse works. It's better than, you know, reduce, reuse, and recycle. It's part of the process.
So I guess we've talked about you know, some of the challenges with some of the solutions that we have. So maybe we can talk about some of the solutions to those challenges. So Malik, I guess, you know, do you have thoughts a little bit? We talked about it some, but on from your vantage point and for materials for the arts, like we have this circular economy nonprofit who's coming, and you're also a city agency, but you're kind of your own thing too. So what are some of the ways it can be with film and television or across some of the other work you've seen as a way to kind of increase the uptake of people using the services or to increase awareness that you could share?
Okay. So I feel like we've been doing a lot of reaching out, which in my time of reaching out, I have noticed that people are moving around. You know, they change jobs, sometimes they relocate. So in my experience of reaching out to some of my prior contacts, I have noticed like that was maybe not the best way to go about it. Not because you know, it's like improper or informal. It's just they're doing other things potentially, and they may not need our services, or they may not be able to use the services because they're not in the city. I have been able to get in contact with some of the people from the past, but yeah, I mean, it would be great if there was a more official way where I guess the city of New York can make productions that we're planning on filming or that are currently filming um more aware of the options, because I believe someone was saying earlier, if we were a part of the process a little earlier, and I do believe like a lot of the times when people are contacting us, it is when they're wrapping. So it's kind of a condensed amount of time that we have to fully do what we do. Uh, I am really appreciative of the members because they really do come out and they really clear the spaces. Um, but yeah, if there was a way that felt a little more official, yeah, I mean, I've even been, you know, asked to, you know, like kind of take a trip around certain parts of the city and just like kind of interact with some of the people, some of the locals, and just, you know, kind of spread the word. You know, I've had like some flyers, business cards, and just kind of pass them around, talk to store owners and whatnot, just to spread that word. But if there was something just a little more official, 'cause I just feel like
Like someone like from the city.
Someone from the city, because
Oh,
I mean, like when I was doing that, and this was like more towards in the summertime when I was just kind of taking trips like in the garment district or Chinatown or wherever I was. I mean, I can wear a branded shirt or a branded hoodie, but it's not quite the same as, I guess, more of a city official.
okay.
Because people are coming in there, people are all around the city, kind of offering
The
their
next time you're going
services.
out.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'll piggyback on that because I feel the same way. I mean, by the time that people hear about these things, they're already like in the middle of production or at the end of production. And something that, I've been asking for, it's not just New York City, it's like the unions and the studios, like you need everyone to be involved in this. Is like what at the beginning is the start packet, if you will, of like, hey, here are the things that are all available to you because now more than ever, I mean, job, we just went through some strikes and people are very, happy to have jobs and they don't want to change anything they do because they're scared. It's like, well, if I make this change, like I could get fired. So as early as we can get them in terms of any sort of education and just give them the available resources, I think is just gonna really help. And it's tough. Like I get it. People are scared for their jobs, but education is, I think, we mentioned it earlier, education is everything.
Yeah. And so maybe Francesca, you had talked about one of your challenges on set was like how to get buy-in in terms of the fact that you're really designed to be sort of in one spot. So like your work with the caterers and stuff. How'd that work out?
Yeah. So for us, like a lot of times people want to work with us and that's great, but that we have to work, we can't go to a different location every day for for the reasons of our logistics of all of our clients. We need one local spot. So actually a movie we're working on right now is working really well because the caterer is based out of Steiner Studio and the caterer is going back every night to the Steiner Studio. So we drop off our inventory at Steiner and pick up the dirties at Steiner. So that's sort of this ideal situation because there can be this like centralized location. But I need the caterer to get comfortable with this idea, and everyone knows this, like they have a lot of work and it's hard and it's fast and their bus, their what's it called, the van is very small or whatever, so there are hurdles there, but I think they're really doable because the experience we've had with Steiner recently has been fabulous. It's worked really well. They seem happy, and then the movie set's super happy because they're achieving great results. So yeah, but it's a
It's
hurdle.
like a chance to maybe, yeah, you could give us insight if there are folks who are tuned in who want to, try to get buy-in. Who are the key people on set that you need to really have buy-in in order to implement the kind of strategies you guys offer?
Wow. Yeah, it changes, with every production. I mean, obviously, one always assumes you really need the buy-in of the UPM. And you do in an ideal world. And you definitely need that buy-in to get changes earlier on. But I find working with departments, it's always really unexpected, who has been secretly within, the confines and the construct of a busy film set, who has been secretly doing this stuff anyway, who also sees the materials that they're handling day to day, which costume department head sees those clothing items as assets that really should go back to the community. And there are lots of people working in this industry that already have been thinking this way. So I never go in there with a clipboard saying, you must do this and you must do that. I always go in saying, hey, what have you been doing? And what have you always wanted to do, but didn't have the person power to accomplish? Let us help you with that. Because there are lots of barriers. There's union rules. Can we touch something? Can we not touch something? But when we work together with departments, we get incredible results. I'm thinking of a film that we shot in a more remote location that featured an old school stadium. So they clad this entire stadium in wood. And it was going to take 9 dumpsters to dump that wood. So I had a word with production, with the UPM, saying, is there any way that we could get our hands on that wood without breaking union rules? And is there any way that we could convince Transpo to let us take it to Habitat? We worked with the unions. We did the math in terms of the cost of the dumpsters and what it would cost to hire 4 guys for 4 days to de-nail all that wood. And it was cheaper to donate it than it was to dump it. So they gave us the green light on that. And I think that wood, could have built something like 2 to 3 houses. It was these are massive amounts of what are really assets to a hurting community.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I think that's another thing that often, kind of to the thing we were talking about with Steve about productivity, is that there can be a cost saving component. It's just, again, this theme that comes up in all these conversations is about information sharing. How do you, make sure people know about this? And someone in the comments said, could we have this as a packet, from the city when people come in to get permits, which we should. So I'm going to look into that. I think it's about, from the city's perspective, if we're talking about challenges, is we're not here to, we have you guys representing organizations, right? But we're not promoting your particular product or service. We're giving an example across lots of discussions of different strategies. And so, sometimes in our own rules and regulations that try to act in the interest of, ethics, it can miss the forest for the trees sometimes, because sometimes there are rules that prevent us from promoting companies unless we're sure we have an exhaustive list, but I'm sure there's ways to figure this out, because we should be able to help and be a resource for this kind of information, hopefully, and get ahead of it. So one thing I always like to talk about is New York City. So, it's just an opportunity to talk about what makes New York kind of a unique place to do this work in terms of, and it can be positive or negative. I always give people a chance to kvetch because it's something New Yorkers like to do, but I've actually gotten a lot of positive things people say. Steve lives in LA. What can you do? But everyone else. So Tamsin, you were saying that there were lots of things you loved about working in New York that create a good environment for this work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great set, isn't it? And that's why it's so popular. And it is funny in New York, when you're looking for your set. I once ordered lunch from the wrong catering van because I thought that was my set, and my set was 1 block over. But a lot of the things that New York has put into place have really helped us. No idling policy is huge for us. One of our services is to monitor the energy side, and we're always asking production vehicles to not idle, with varying success. So yeah, the fact that when I walk onto a set now, it's quiet. There's not all 20 trucks all revving their engines is amazing. The kvetching is the spatial element. We have had, Jonathan, I don't know if you've had this, but we have had times with hand pickups where suddenly the client will call me and say, our trash wasn't picked up, what's going on? And I'll call the hauler, and they picked up the trash pile 10 feet down the street from the trash pile that they were supposed to pick up. So it can be complicated in that way, just because everything is so close and so tight. But New York
is, who don't live here, one interesting thing about New York that the mayor is currently trying to address with containerization is that we just leave our trash in piles of bags on the side of the street, and then trash haulers are supposed to kind of just figure out like which building that heap represents. So we're trying to move away from that with containerization, but I'm not surprised that, Jonathan, you kind of describe how it works, like when you leave your pile, how do you do that to indicate that it's related to that?
Yeah, so basically, if we don't have, an eco consultant with us, we'd be doing that. And wherever our footprint is, we'd make a pile, how many bags, blue tape, we put some blue tape and leave a note. And then it's kind of, it's pretty amazing. We just use WhatsApp and we just pin it, and they just pick it up in the middle of the night. And I've only had, I think it's only been twice that they've forgotten to pick it up. And if you call them immediately, it's gone. So they're pretty good. Yeah, I must recommend them.
Okay. And I guess Malik, so you're kind of this bridge right now between nonprofit organizations, service organizations, city agencies, and the film and television world. So how often, which is something I think unique about New York, because it's such a large city, there's so many great organizations doing all this work, and there is this opportunity to kind of bring them together. So how often at the liquidation events do you not liquidate everything, and how often are you taking it back to your warehouse in Long Island City? Just so we get a sense of like how this works.
I'd say nearly every time that we've conducted a liquidation event, we've taken at least most of the things that we couldn't liquidate. I think that we just did an event yesterday. Today, like this event was the only time we couldn't liquidate and take more things that weren't able to be taken yesterday. Mainly because a lot of the time I feel like when I hear that we can't take more things, it's mainly because they have already scheduled garbage or someone to come by and take these things already, or other productions are being handed these things, or they've always find an arrangement where we can't take it. But I would say nearly every time, if not every time except this last one, we've taken the remaining items.
And how much of the items do you say, is it like 70% is going at the liquidation event, or just like how much of the stuff is moving on site?
I would I would say at least about 85 to 90%, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on what's being offered. I would say it's circumstantial, but we do a pretty good job at clearing out the space. Like most productions, I would say are pretty satisfied with the amount of things the people come and take. So
That's such a good solution, because then you're to the spatial issue. When you're reducing trucking, having trucks is challenging. You're
right.
not taking from one place to store in another place, have people come there. So it's just seems very efficient. I guess one thing before we open up to questions I wanted to talk about, which I think gets back to this communication issue and trying to make it more comfortable for folks, is that there's this gray area. I think a lot of you have talked with me about a little bit that, so Francesca, because I'm a little bit weird about chemicals and all these things. So I wanted to understand about microplastics and all these different things. And you were kind of talking to me a little bit about, there's not just one clear solution. So if you could kind of talk a little more about how you view that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when our head of our company, Caroline Vanderlip, was looking into solutions, she looked into lots of different solutions. She looked into glass, she looked into stainless steel, and kind of did a extensive research on the pros and cons, and ended up on polypropylene for the moment being a very solid plastic option, but we're always conscious and aware of issues around microplastics, and so we incorporate into being conscious of that in our QA, in our quality control process. So we're pulling things off of our line if there's scratches or stains, etc. They're sent back to the manufacturer and ground up and made into new product. So we're conscious of it, but will there come? Are we tied forever to polypropylene? Absolutely not. We're always looking for some options that might work. It's just there's certain logistics. Is it heavy? Does it break? Like different things that are going to make it reusable. And some things just don't survive well with lots of uses with lots of people at scale. So those are some of the factors. There's never a perfect solution. It's just moving the needle in the right direction, is in my opinion.
Yeah, and Tamsin, you kind of had like a practical approach, which was helpful to me, actually, since we spoke around recycling. And maybe you could talk a little bit about some of that, because I think it feels overwhelming, and sometimes you feel like you have to do it perfectly. And then if you can't do it perfectly, you're like, oh, whatever, I just won't do it at all, which is not the way we want folks to go. So could you talk a little bit about some of those, how you grapple with the gray areas in your work?
Well, I think that everyone's frustrated with recycling. This is why I'm a compost fanatic. because compost is something that I can definitely sell to cast and crew as 100% authentic. I've met the composter, I've seen the process that you use. It's lovely and transparent. The opposite, as we know, of recycling. I will say, you know, not to toot California's horn, but there are a lot of really good laws coming down the pipe in California that I think are going to be groundbreaking for how we approach recycling, including making sure that manufacturers are responsible financially for the recycling process. Right now, you know, we're in a very big gray area. Recycling is very delicate and difficult to do. We don't consider, you know, burning plastic for energy. That's not true recycling. That is creating a new toxic situation. So what do we do on set? We make sure that things are as clean as they can be and as dry as they can be before they go into our recycling bins, so that they don't contaminate the rest of the recycling. Anything else we put into landfill. We don't wish cycle. You know, we don't hope that someone is going to, you know, suddenly figure out how to recycle that number 6, you know, styrofoam tray. We mostly recycle 1s and 2s, and we try and keep plastic offset. So Jonathan mentioned that we're big fans of reusable water bottles and big refillable water jugs on set. We're also big fans of aluminum cans on set. Aluminum is infinitely recyclable. There's a really good market for it. There's a really good market for cardboard. So there's some elements of recycling that you can feel good about. Plastics not being one of them.
Yeah. And what I learned yesterday when I was talking to Tamsin is if it's not totally clean, it's going to contaminate the waste stream and the recycling stream. So just throw it out and you can feel okay doing that. So I felt okay today throwing out, you know, some plastic stuff that I just really wasn't going to clean. And anyway, so, but you know, the stuff I did clean, I let it dry and it's in my recycling bag right now. So, you know, for folks who are listening, if you have questions, put them in the chat. And then while we're doing that, I'm just going to go around for everyone. And if there's one thing, you know, for your company or your work that you're looking to the future, like what's the next thing you're doing to advance the work or the next thing you want to tackle? So I guess, Jonathan, I'm going to put you on the spot because some of the stuff is out of your control. But being here today or listening to this stuff, you know, what do you think is the next forefront for you in terms of addressing some of these things on location?
For me, I don't know if there's so much I can do specifically. You know, I think the biggest change that we need to do is, like, again, with the no idling is really figuring out how to get good power, you know, and sustainable power for our sets, but maybe not use diesel and gas. I think that's the biggest thing for me. And I think renewables can do that, right? But I don't know. So
Malik, what's kind of on your horizon in expanding this work?
Really just keeping doing more liquidation events, truthfully, and still, well, doing the liquidation events mainly to spread the word as best we can. Also maintaining relationships with those contacts that we've developed over the course of this year. Yeah, I think it's really just keep maintaining the relationships and then trying to develop new ones. That's what I see for us.
And maybe you can put in the chat if you want, making sure it's going to everyone, like the best email address if somebody wants to have you guys do a liquidation event. You can drop that in the chat to everyone.
I will.
Steve, what about you? You talked to me a little bit about like some of the new areas you're trying to tackle paper waste.
Yeah, we're trying to bring more people in to use Scriptation because we focus, my background is TV production, so I focused a lot on productions with, you know, tens of hundreds of script changes, but we're trying to bring in some other users, and we just launched some line learning tools for actors. They are all on their phones all day long, so why not also learn lines on your phone? And why are you printing sides when you have them also on your phone? So we're trying to, there's a huge market of working and non-working actors, and I would love to get rid of paper sides totally. So that is my goal.
Great. Francesca, do you guys have any new areas you're expanding into?
Well, we are in Brooklyn. We're in Philadelphia. We've just opened our 3rd location in Boston. I'm really looking to make this more accessible to more movie sets because I just see that, that garbage, those garbage bags you all were talking about earlier in the conversation, you don't have to have those. We could be picking up reusables, and eliminating the waste, really reducing the waste in the beginning. So I just want to sort of have more interactions with the caterers and see the different ways that we can make this happen and actually really reduce the amount of single use that's used on the movie sets.
Great. And Tamsin, how about you guys over at Earth Angel? You talked a little technology and things like that, or
Yeah, we've just combined with the Green Shop, they are helping us provide mobile solutions for real-time updating of data, which will really help provide really specific data for our clients and for our cast and crews. We're working with things like dynamic inventories that we can share in, so that we'll understand better when, particularly on episodic television, when a set is due to be deconstructed, so that we have a heads up, of more than a day or two, to make sure that that material is recovered appropriately. So yeah, we're really looking to technology to kind of streamline solutions that we've been doing, scratching our way physically to do up until now. So I'm excited.
that's great. So we have a couple questions, and one I'm glad was flagged because I meant to ask it too. So obviously, again, it's a fast-paced environment with concerns around budget. So how do you guys make the case around the finance side? And, how do you look at it also dynamically, in terms of, okay, well, maybe, Francesca, I think we spoke about this, maybe this service is more expensive, but trash hauling is also expensive, so you're going to have less trash bags. So whoever that relates to, can you talk a little bit about how you approach that with the powers that be? I'm going to let you guys choose who goes first.
I'll just say quickly, I'm not dealing with the powers to be as I'm a vendor, but your point exactly is what I would have said, which is that when I'm selling our service I have people realize it's not an apples to apples situation. It's not just, oh, this costs, compostable product costs this and reusable is this. You have to think of the savings in the different buckets, and waste hauling costs can really be reduced. And that's not something you normally would compare that cost with the food packaging cost line. So it's being creative about thinking about where things are going to be saved. So that's my 2 cents about that.
Yeah, I think each company is going to have their own way, but I would be willing to bet that most companies are going to actually save you, more in the long term or even short term. I mean, with scriptation, we could give you the one-to-one paper savings that it's going to cost you, but in terms of, we also say, like, in terms of productivity, in terms of better product, if you have everybody on the system, they'll be more efficient. You won't have to waste time. Maybe you don't go over by 30 minutes that day, and that's going to save you a ton of money. So there's a lot of intangible things in addition to, like, the one-to-one, like, this is the exact savings you'll make.
Yeah, I guess Tamsin, you probably have some insight into that because it's.
Yeah, we're always juggling these budgets. So we do budgets, per department. Our department works with every department, and there are costs associated. I think those intangibles are very important to talk about, what this does for crew morale. When I first started doing this job, I started as an eco rep. So I was the one, and I'm not too proud to do it to this day. I was the one sorting through the trash, etc. And people were so delighted to see me and so delighted that something was being done about a problem that had bothered them for the entire time that they were working in the film and TV industry. So there's a huge morale boost. We also do food donations every day, and I would always invite, whoever cast and crew wants to come and help me, get this food to this local organization who really needs it. People would come out just because they were having a hard day and they just needed, a little tiny piece of good news. And to see, 7 trays, going into the back of a van that was going to feed homeless people. Really made them feel great. But as I say, we're always juggling with the budgets. If we don't use a little budget here, we will go back to UPM and say, you know, we have this little fund here. Could we do this little extra thing like denail wood or in some other way, you know, meaningfully repurpose materials? But I do want to say to people who are listening that this is not impossible to do on a lower budget. You know, we're talking at this level where, you know, dynamic inventories and, you know, these massive set sales. And, you know, if you're working on a smaller budget, you could make inroads into doing this kind of work. It doesn't need to be perfect. And that's something that I'm always communicating to our reps too. You know, if you're finding that you're getting a 99% diversion rate, well, it's because you're not looking hard enough. And sometimes doing something simple, like really forensically tracking, you know, where is the waste going? Are people leaving food on their trucks or trailers? Sometimes, you know, doing some of that commonsensical work can make a really big difference in your environmental footprint. So I don't want people to think that they need, you know, it all to be perfect. It's just maybe just make a start, you know, see how much, run the comparisons between a solar trailer and a regular trailer and see if that's within your budget. See if you do have biodiesel in your area, and if Transpo can use that biodiesel, if it's convenient for them to use. There are so many elements that can go into it, but you can start small, and it will still have those intangible benefits.
Jonathan.
Can I mention something about that? Yeah, that's specifically in New York. Actually, that brought that up because I actually got to do a job on the West Coast with some LA people. And I really do think we should get rid of the honey wagons. And just because I know on the West Coast, they just bring campers. So I know the honey wagon just draws so much power, but we can just get rid of it with bathroom trailers and like 2 extra campers. I think that would be a lot better as well. But that just reminded me of that. So sorry about that.
Before I get to the question someone just posted, Malik, you guys must do this in terms of the finance. Are you giving donators kind of a receipt for tax write-off purposes? Is that part of the draw sometimes too?
Absolutely. So at the end of the process, you will receive a tax letter, basically stating the amount, the weight of your donation and the total value, which will be provided by the production. But also, I mean, just to say, like, you know, if you're calling like someone that will come by and pick up your trash, I mean, I feel like, yeah, we're an option for you that, I mean, we may not save you time, but we'll definitely save you money because you will not have to pay for that, you know. And I mean, you'll sleep with a better conscience.
Which is always a nice intangible.
Mhm.
So one person was asking about kind of the environmental benefits of doing production in a city like New York, which is obviously a massive city, versus somewhere that's more remote. So I guess, you know, one thing, Tamsin, when we were talking about how you liked working in New York is because not only the local laws you mentioned, but we have composting infrastructure, you said, and like Baton Rouge or something, there was no composting. So do folks have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, New York City definitely has a lot of the infrastructure to, yeah, it's really great. I really do believe that because, like, again, when I did that job on the West Coast, we all had to figure out new processes and kind of educating the vendors of what our needs are. So New York City really, it's just a lot easier, and everybody gets the pace. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, Jonathan, you know, one of my jobs is to actually vet composting processors and recycling processors. And as you say, like it's not only the haulers, it's where are they taking this to?
Right.
That's a piece of the puzzle that most people don't have time to put together, but I am the waste strategy manager, so I do. And the difference, you know, is so vast in places that are not used to filming in this way. And I was telling Shira in Baton Rouge, I literally called every company that I could find with the word compost in it, in order to find a place that would even compost food scraps. And as it turned out, a crew member had a good connect to the urban garden who had never returned my call. So it is, again, that relationship element that meant that we could then compost in an urban garden nearby. But I've had to get very, very creative at times. And New York City is such a pleasure to work in that you have this great shorthand with vendors who know exactly what you're up against.
Yeah, I always forget about that. Like when I go back, like do jobs in Jersey, it's just like it's so close, but just so different. And even with this, I'm using the same vendors, I'm using with Avid, but it's just, yeah, again, different regulations. But yeah, New York City, it's pretty great. It's a great place to be.
Hey, everyone. Sorry, I almost died on set. Okay, everyone. Thanks for bearing with me.
We would have got a lot of views. I mean,
Well,
Yeah. Drama.
anyway, I want to thank everyone for being part of this conversation. I know I learned a ton. I think, sorry while I die here. Some of the themes are planning, right? So if we can kind of get ahead of this, like earlier in the game would be great. Also, like, don't feel like you have to do everything. Like, just one person could download Steve's app and like save tons of trees. You could call Malik. I don't think it needs to be a huge production. And I think New York City, we're doing our best to share these resources. I love the idea of us giving out a packet with permits. And you guys too, every time you join in, you listen to the conversation, you kind of help that word of mouth. So we'll be doing our next one in January, and I'll be emailing you all with more information about that. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, amazing speakers. And I look forward to seeing you at our next Film Green office hours.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank
Feel
you.
better. Feel
Thank
better.
you. Feel better. Feel better.